Yo, what's up? What's going on, everybody? What's good? Boxing Source checking in here, and I wanted to talk about this thing with Canelo Alvarez. Canelo Alvarez, it looks like the reports have been coming out that he is leaning towards a deal with the DAZN. The announcement had been made that he will have his fight on May 7th against Dmitry Bivol, and it looks like that is part of a two-fight deal where he would be fighting Dmitry Bivol, and then the reports would be that he would later fight Gennady Golovkin in September. But there's also been more news circulating that he could have another fight on the DAZN later in the year. That's right. He'll be having 3 fights in the year. One in May, one in September, one in December, And think about it is that the reports that came out that the total package would be that Canelo would earn up to $160 million for those 3 fights. First, you have Dmitry Bivol, of course, WBA light heavyweight champion, undefeated. Has been there in the light heavyweight division, had his campaign, few defenses of that WBA title. Some have criticized this particular pick or the particular decision for Canelo Alvarez, given that the 2 fights that were proposed here for this is Dmitry Bivol and Gennady Golovkin. While on the other side, there was an offer for Canelo Alvarez to fight the WBC middleweight champion that would be going up to 168 pounds, Jamal Charlo, and then also the former 168-pound champion, David Benavidez. Those 2 guys, both of them undefeated, both of them that would be really good challengers to Canelo Alvarez. But here with this particular decision by Canelo to fight Dmitry Bivol first, and then, depending on what goes on with that, fights Gennady Golovkin for a 3rd time. And if y'all have followed this particular channel for a while, that this particular person right here is not a good fan of a 3rd fight between Canelo Alvarez and Gennady Golovkin. But also, like I said, with the reports of a 3rd fight that could happen within 2022, sometime in December, it's likely going to be against John Ryder, or at least that's what I'm leaning towards. I don't think it would be against anybody else. I don't think it would be against Artur Beterbiev. I definitely don't think it's going to be against Demetrius Andrade. I'm like, if it hadn't happened in 154 and it hadn't happened in 160 pounds, I don't think it's going to happen in 168. Even though Demetrius Andrade is kind of slated to face Zach Parker for that number 1 spot in the WBO for the 168-pound division. But here, like I said, Canelo Alvarez, of course, the money man, the undisputed super middleweight champion, multi-division champion, now has, made the move alongside his manager and trainer, Eddie Reynoso, to have the fights over on the DAZN, and it's going to be the DAZN pay-per-view. And a lot of people are saying, "Oh my God, it's the DAZN pay-per-view." First off, we got to pay this fee for the DAZN each month, $19.99 a month or $99.99 a year. Now, on top of that, they'll have to pay a pay-per-view price in order to watch this particular fight. Just to break that down, listen, we're talking about Canelo Alvarez. We're talking about guarantees of $50 million or above, And when you do that, you're going to have to find a way to recoup that money, It's not much different than what happens if, he was on a Fox pay-per-view or Showtime pay-per-view like last year against Caleb Plant, They want to see about recouping that particular money there with the DAZN. And they feel like Canelo Alvarez, regardless of who he fights, is going to, generate the audience that they need in order for them to make that money that they would make for these particular fights. One, you have the whole thing with Dmitry Bivol. People don't really see him as, a marketable opponent. Some might not see him as a viable opponent, even though he is a 170-pound world champion. But the main thing is Canelo Alvarez. And if Canelo Alvarez is a big enough star in the sport of boxing, it really doesn't matter who he faces. There will be a market of people that will watch the fights. Okay, so there's that. And then the whole thing with Gennady Golovkin, I guess they want to, go off of what happened with those two fights that were on HBO pay-per-view. But hey, there's still Gennady Golovkin fans out there. So if they're willing to, spend money to watch that fight, if it happens down the line, then it is what it is. We still have to see if Gennady Golovkin is still going to go forward and face Ryota Murata. That would still be at 160 pounds. That would be a unification fight at 160 pounds. But, outside of that, we still got to see here. If, Canelo Alvarez defeats Dmitry Bivol, and if Gennady Golovkin defeats Ryota Murata, then you'll have that clash in September. And that's how that would break down. So I'm still, just saying this is the rundown for Canelo Alvarez here in 2022. But, you still have a group of those boxing fans that say, hey, why didn't he go ahead with the Jamal Charlo and David Benavidez fights? And, even with that whole thing with David Benavidez, if y'all had seen the video there with, Samson Likowitz, who promotes David Benavidez. He claims that the offer for the David Benavidez fight was north of $50 million, but, it still didn't necessarily get Canelo Alvarez and his manager and trainer, Eddie Reynoso, to say, hey, we're going to go ahead and we're going to have that 2-fight deal with Charlo and Benavidez. They went ahead with Bivol and potentially Gennady Golovkin, and then also after that, a third fight. Now, my thing is this, as Floyd Mayweather says, my thing is this. He has these fights, with Bivol and Golovkin. It doesn't mean that fights against Charlo and Benavidez may not happen in 2023. Those could potentially still be on the table. But if he did go with that Charlo and Benavidez route this year, I'm not sure if he would have had, a thing there with Bivol. Well, you probably still would have had Bivol, but you wouldn't have had Golovkin. You probably would have had something else, maybe a Bivol and a better Biev or something like that. But you wouldn't have Golovkin likely in September of 2023. So you just say, hey, you can have this Golovkin fight in 2022, and then we see what happens in 2023. So that's how that whole thing breaks down. Of course, Canelo Alvarez will be facing Dmitry Bivol. That is scheduled for May 7th. That is a couple days after Cinco de Mayo. So you're going to have that scheduled again with Canelo Alvarez fighting in May, but that's how this thing breaks down. Share your thoughts on, the moves by Canelo Alvarez and, Eddie Reynoso, because it's basically Eddie Reynoso running the show. If Eddie Reynoso says this is the direction, then Canelo's going to, roll with that, Of course, Canelo does have a big say in things, but Eddie Reynoso pretty much runs the show. Canelo team is Eddie Reynoso. So that's how that goes. Like I said, share your thoughts. If you like this video, hit that like button. If you haven't subscribed to the Boxing Source, you can subscribe. We really appreciate it. On that note, folks, I'm out. Peace.